built 3 churches there. So I'm taking a position that he brought that particular philosophy or that interpretation of Christian philosophy, the Arian view there. Now, if you go back 11 years prior to that, now, what I mentioned as far as Sabian inscription, when I read about this, I was like, yes, this is fucking validation. This ain't just no hearsay. You know what I mean? Or at least it's as solid as you can get. You know, it ain't just like people passing down information orally, which is cool, but it's at least written. Okay, it is written that Constantinople the second, or Constantine the second, I get his name confused with the place in which he reigned at. He had made an envoy, a trip, a journey, all right, similar to Mansa Musa, much later. And this is significant because it's the first major fucking journey from a Roman emperor into Najran, but following these people being introduced to Christianity. He went there, but he went to a place called Zafar, all right? Zafar is also in southwestern Arabia, as far as the peninsula is concerned, all right? But when he went there, according to these writings, he went to an Ethiopian church there. He visited an Ethiopian church in Zafar of southwestern Arabia in 344 A.D. Now, think about that. 11 years prior to that, St. Frumentius. Now, this is my personal understanding right here. This ain't nobody else's shit. St. Frumentius, or Bishop Frumentius, on his way back, had went to Alexandria, all right, a Roman city at that time, and got permission from the patriarch there, at least one of them, named Athanasius, to become the first bishop of the Aksumite people in Ethiopia. This is 333 A.D. They were blessed from that point. So 11 years later, the emperor himself, Constantine II, makes a visit to southwestern Arabia, in particular, Zafar. By this time period, all right, they had a church built there by the Ethiopians. Now, this is also in accordance with King Azena, who ruled from 320 to 360 A.D. This is all within that same time frame. And according to what's written about him, thus his people, they ruled in southern Egypt, northern Sudan, northern Somalia, but more importantly, southern Arabia and also Yemen. Again, if they ruled in southern Arabia, even if it wasn't all the way across the board, as far as proximity is concerned, they definitely ruled there in southwestern Arabia, right next to the fucking Red Sea. So 344 A.D., King Azena is still in office. He doesn't die until 16 fucking years later, all right? So 344 A.D., 11 years after the fact, the emperor of Rome, Constantine II, makes his journey to Zafar. Based on written inscriptions, he visits an Ethiopian church there. During the time where that region or those people in that region were under Ethiopian influence. Therefore, they were the first people, in my judgment, in my personal opinion, that's analysis, to bring Christianity there. But what I will say in addition to that is that I believe that initially speaking, all right, and I'm just being objective about it, they first believed in the Trinitarian doctrine. Why do I say that? Okay, Constantine II leaned toward Arianism, yet Bishop Athanasius was a proponent of the Trinitarian doctrine, but an opponent against Arianism. Yet he's the guy that blessed St. Frumentius to go back into Ethiopia, thus the Aksumites, as a bishop there, meaning that they both adhere to the same philosophical interpretation of Christianity, which later on gets referred to, collectively speaking, as the non-Chalcedonian fucking doctrine. So at their initial stages, they believe in a Trinitarian doctrine. That's what I honestly believe. Now, 10 years from that point, Arianism gets introduced, at least from a documented standpoint, as far as that which can be grasped, what's written about these people. Arianism, a form of it at least, or Arianism itself, gets introduced to the people, to the Christian population there as far as Najran, by Theophilus the Great, all right, who was blessed to be a bishop from Arian proponents before going there to Najran. And when he went there in 354, he was personally sent there by Constantine II, who also leaned toward Arianism as far as that interpretation of Christianity, but more so the interpretation of God, thus Jesus. So that's the early introduction of that philosophy there. That's why I believe, initially speaking, Ethiopians are the people that brought that there. That's nobody else's fucking words. It's my shit. That's what I believe. Now, I had already documented all that in my Facebook, in my notes section or whatever, because I feel it's important. Like I had said, I wanted to trace this shit and get it right. Now, going into the other two characters, the first guy is a guy named Haya. Now, Haya was a merchant, right? And he had relations with the Romans also, but he had made it into Al-Hira. Now, it was a Christian population there also. Again, I didn't go too much into the history as far as like the spread of Christianity into Iran and Iraq. I didn't think it was too relevant because I was really just trying to trace it to Najran, but I pretty much got the initial stages down packed. But on his way back from Rome, he had made it into Al-Hira. Now, this is between 438 and 457 AD. So it's the 5th century, a fucking 100 years later, all right, after Theophilus, all right? So during that time, the head of the Sassanid Empire was a guy named Yazdegerd II, and that's the time period that he reigned, 438 to 457 AD. And he had conflict within his empire also. Again, as I mentioned in one of my earlier blogs, Al-Hira was also where the Lachman people lived at, but overall, that region and Iraq is also a part of the Persian, thus the Sassanid Empire during this time period, and a great majority of the Christian minorities lived there in Al-Hira, even though that they were being persecuted. Now, like I say, Nestorius was born and lived from 387 until 450 AD. By this time, during the first half of the first half of the fucking 5th century, that version of Christianity had spread there, and that's where this guy had got introduced to it at. Again, I'm talking about Haya, this merchant. When he left Al-Hira, that's when he went into Najran and started preaching that to the population there, all right? Now, that ain't nothing but, like, when I think about it in my mind, that ain't nothing but like a further introduction of that philosophy, but, a form of it, the earlier form of it as far as Arianism had already got introduced to that region. So that's just like somewhat of a different variation. It's really not that much different. Now, after him, another guy, his name was Simeon. Now, he was supposedly some type of mason. He was like a builder or whatever, and he had lived among the people in Najran. Now, his story, I think a lot of it is embellished. It don't make a lot of sense. You know what I mean? As far as like the concrete facts that I just provided, when I'm about to go into his story and what's supposedly, like, what's purported about him, and then when you compare that to what I just put forth, you'll see why I say, like, it's exaggerated. No offense to the people that put this story out there, but as far as my mind, I don't think that it's completely true. But he settled in Najran. And during this time, the people there supposedly there was no Christianity there. Again, based on the articles that I read online, they say it was first brought into Najran during the 5th century, and then they say possibly the 4th century. That's what they say. Nothing beyond the 5th century. So that's why I'm glad I kind of processed this and dug deeper and then found out a lot more than, went in depth with my thoughts and basically figured out how Christianity was first brought there. And I'm not a Christian myself. I just like history. But supposedly, right, when he settled there during that time period, the people there were polytheists. Now, it was a big-ass, really tall palm tree that they deified. And just like similar to the Kaaba, they'll put like garments and jewelry and female ornaments around this tree and then have their little rituals around it. That's what they believe. All right, now this guy, Simeon, was a Christian. Now, some people were pretty much curious about what he believed in. He explained a little bit of it to some people, but he really didn't go too far. Now, it is said he felt like their minds were too weak to understand where he might come from. In other words, their belief system is so fucking different, it would be hard for him to find a language to convey his point of view to them to where they have like an adamant understanding of it. So he really didn't bother going too far into it. But there was like one person in particular who would listen to him, and Simeon found out that this person who would listen to some of the stuff that he'll say when he would open up about his religion, that same listener didn't really spread or talk about what Simeon said to him to other people too much. So Simeon was somewhat pleased by it, and then he started teaching a little bit more to this person. And then he got a little creative with it to where he'll take little arrows and write down scriptures on these arrows and throw them in the fire. But to make a long story short, that's when he started proselytizing to people there, and that is how Christianity was brought or spread into Najran. That's the history. Again, Theophilus, or really Bishop Theophilus the Indian, I believe a lot of it. Haye, a little bit, yeah, I believe some of it. Simeon, I'm not 100% sure on that. You know what I'm saying? But again, even when you exclude all three of those people, my personal analysis, I believe, is much more solid. Not to try to issue on anybody else, call it arrogance, hey, whatever. I think it's a little bit more solid. So that's the early history of Christianity being brought into Najran. Then much later on, you had the king of the Himyarites. His name was Yusuf ibn, I want to say Thamir, but it could be Thamir because it's Thamir. So I'm not sure if TH is Tha or Ta, but it's Yusuf ibn Thamir. I don't know what his problem was. This part, I would like to read much more into it. I just kind of like skimmed over it because it's not that relevant. But I will say this. What happened concerning him and the Christians of Najran is one of the earliest fucking documented genocides in history. For whatever reason, he went crazy and he just started fucking decimating the Christian population in Najran, and he'll have his people dig ditches and then start throwing these people in ditches, and then the whole population, even people that wasn't soldiers, would fight against him and martyr themselves and jump in ditches. And then you had people that tried to plead with him, like it was a lady, I forget her name, she attempted to plead with him even though she was sort of stern about it, and he basically spit in her face, like he made her drink some of her blood, and he still executed her. Now, you got like two versions of this story. Now, all of this took place in the 6th century, by the way, the first half of the 6th century. So this is before Muhammad was born. Two major versions of this story, and this is also how, these people had got conquered by the Oxamites as well, because of what Yusuf ibn Tamur had started. But two versions is that, the Romans had found out about what happened and attempted to join forces with the Oxamites to, defend and then kill this guy, in which he eventually did get killed. But another version is that, you had a merchant that went back to the Ethiopians and explained what was happening to their Christian population as far as this genocide, all right, against them or toward them from the Himyarites. And that's what started a big-ass fight. Now, that part of history is pretty significant because the Catholic Church today still commemorate some of these people, because, like, the head of the Najran tribe was a guy named Al-Hayriat. And he is celebrated today as a saint. In fact, they changed his name to Saint Arethusa. So, he got like there's a holiday attributed to him by the Catholic Church also. So a lot of that is also true as well. So that's the history of those people before the Islamic conquest. But anyway, as far as the initial chronological stages of the introduction of Christianity into Najran, that's my take on it. Now, going back into the chapter of Najran, and I spent the whole week and a half basically pausing to make sure I get the story straight before I go into the next chapter beyond Najran. Now, going back to the dialogue, right? When, they was talking or whatever, and like I say, the monks was like, okay, we embrace Islam even before you. Now, Islam basically means to submit to the will of God. But I think it's a little bit more to that quote in itself for him to say, we embrace Islam before you, and then them have a back and forth as to what Jesus was. Now, I believe that these two monks, all right, because Nestorianism and non-Chalcedonianism were two distinct Christian philosophies that were still adhered to by the population of Najran up until this point. But based on the language, all right, provided in this book, The Origins of an Islamic State, compilation from like 1,200 years ago, they refer to these two men as monks. Again, the other author calls one a military chief, and then he calls the other civilian chief. But I'm sticking to the language as far, or the title of them being monks, and the reason why is because the dialogue. Now, I also believe that they had a similar conception or notion of Jesus, because what took place following the dialogue, and as far as like the stipulation of the terms that Muhammad provided to them, which I will get into in a second. Now, when they went back and forth or whatever, and they both explained where they were coming from as far as Jesus, I believe by the end of that portion of the dialogue, Muhammad pretty much grasped or had a grasp that what they believed as far as Jesus wasn't really that foreign to what he believed. And indeed, you could trace both fundamentals of their notions to more so of an ancient period, like an ancient philosophical discussion that went on hundreds of years before both of them. And I'm going to say why in a second. Why I believe that was the case, that they believed a similar notion of Jesus. When the first part of that dialogue was over with, Muhammad suggested to them that they join him or climb the mountain with him. Now, to me, that's more so like poetic language. He's basically talking about like the spread of Islam and them becoming more so not necessarily just subjects, but partners, contemporaries in that aim. And again, I believe it's because it's rooted in the same notion of Jesus, ultimately speaking. So the monks, in which there were two of them, had a conversation between each other. One was like, okay, yeah, let's join him in his quest and climb this mountain. But let's not kill anybody, because that's what I forgot to mention. When Muhammad asked them to join him, he did say against the people that didn't believe what they believed. Or, in a conversation between these two monks, they didn't want to hinder anybody else or kill anybody else. You know what I mean? So they was like, okay, well, the other monks suggested, okay, well, let's get him the land of Al-Kharj, which is also in Arabia, but it's in Central Arabia. Now, that's the only thing as far as this dialogue in this chapter itself that they mentioned about Al-Kharj. They didn't really go too far into it, and then when I did my little background research on it, I couldn't really find too much about it aside from it also being in Central Arabia. But another thing that I think is interesting as far as like these hadiths in the book, they only mention 2 people. Now, in trying to cross-reference this information, other articles, they mention like 10 or 12 or whatever, but only because this document or these documents go back like 1,200 years, I'm sticking to the book so far. Now, later on when I come across, other forms of information that are just as old and possibly those hadiths that I read about on the internet could be that old, but so far I'm sticking to this book. I'm not going to go too far beyond the pale, you know what I mean, unless I really have to. I don't think so. So, yeah, that's all they said about Al-Kharj or whatnot. So then that's when the conversation continued, and eventually they got to talking about, like, the terms that they agreed upon. Now, Muhammad stipulated to them, he said, okay, look, twice a year, all right, out of 2 months each year, you got to pay over dirhams. And it has to be, not dirhams, but robes. He said, like, once a year you got to provide at least, 2,000 robes in total. And both of these months were, the first one would be the month of Safar. The second month would be the month of Rajab, which is supposed to be like a month where no type of fighting, as far as Arabian culture is concerned, no type of fighting would be taking place. So the month of Safar, they have to give over 1,000 robes. The second month, they have to give over 1,000 robes also. Now, I'm like, damn, robes? Now, this is the first time that I'm hearing about as far as, like, robes being a part of a sadaqah, but it just makes me think about the Kaaba and stuff like that. I guess, like, the people in Yemen made some pretty good clothing or whatever because, the same material that they'll make clothing out of, they'll use that same type of material to cover up the Kaaba. You know what I'm saying? And as far as, like, the people in Najran, they did the same thing with the tree that they deified. So I guess, like, that's one of the areas that they specialized in, to the point where, I would say it was a certain amount of yarn for the clothing or robes that they produced, but, it was definitely a certain amount of appreciation for it. So they have to give 2,000 a year. But, they could substitute possessions that they had, like as far as animals or any type of goods or whatever, coat, nail, armor, crops, whatever, what have you. They were able to substitute that for these robes, but it had to be like a reciprocated value. You know what I'm saying? That was the stipulation that he gave them, which I think is pretty light. Now, also, he did demand that, he said, in case there was some type of rebellion in Yemen, even though he didn't really specify the place, you know what I mean? The term that they mentioned in the book is Al-Yemen. I'm thinking that's just like, the name for Yemen overall. I mean, if it's like a certain place within Yemen itself, okay, on my next audio blog, I guess I kind of have to make a correction. But I'm thinking when he say in case of a potential or in case of some type of rebellion in Yemen, he's talking about either Al-Jurash, all right, in the area of Sadah, or he's talking about Tabala. That's my understanding so far, because I believe I looked up Yemen and didn't find, I didn't find anything specific about it. As far as my recollection is concerned, again, during the next chapter, I make a correction, because really these are just more so like chapter blogs, adding to my overall blog anyway. It's not like 100%. It's official, but it's not like each one of these audio recordings is going to be a part of my overall fucking blog about West Africa. You know what I'm saying? These are more so like book report type of audio recordings just to make sure I document my original analysis of my ideas and shit. And also to confirm that I don't steal from anybody else. But that was the stipulation he threw out there. So he said, like, in case something like that happened, you know, they have to give over 30 pieces of body armor that they call coat and mails, 30 mares, which is basically female horses, and then 30 camels. But he did say, when it's all said and done, in case a rebellion happened and they had to follow through with this, when it's all said and done, any type of losses will be, like, they'll get recompensated for. So that's what he said. And then the last part of the terms is that, unlike the people of Dumat al-Jandal, they did not have to destroy their idols, and they did not have to convert to Islam. Not only that, they didn't have to give up any zakats. They didn't have to give up land. And, like, the people within the region of Najran, as far as, like, the priests, the civilian chiefs, any type of title or whatever of representing a overall society or aristocracy in itself, like, those people maintained their positions and didn't necessarily have to answer to Muhammad in that aspect. So in other words, there was no type of Islamic intrusion upon those people in their lands. So when I thought about it, I was like, damn, that's a pretty light stipulation, especially compared to other areas to where, you know, you had people who believed in Christianity. Like, when you thinking about as far as all those tribes and those places that I mentioned in ancient Syria, and when I say ancient Syria, again, I'm talking about northern Arabia, eastern Arabia, and portions of Asia Minor, at least up into Lebanon. You know what I'm saying? And possibly southern Jordan. But I know for sure, at least like from Lebanon down into northwestern Arabia, because they considered that area Syria as far as the language that the Arabians used, and also the people that lived in those areas also. So when I think about all those people, okay, I'm gonna go through them again. People of Tabak, within the province of Tabak, people of Al-Jawf, which is north of Tabak, but also still a part of ancient Assyria. You know what I mean? Where the people of Makna lived at. Southwestern Jordan, within the Aqaba region. That population was Jewish, and their chief was a guy named Yuhanna ibn Rubar. Those people, especially Dumat al-Jandar, all right? I don't know if I should mention Al-Jarba. I guess I mentioned Al-Jarba, Al-As. You know, all these different places, the Jutham clan, the fucking Banu Amila clan, and as I mentioned in one of my earlier blogs, in part, you could consider them a part of the Banu Kaba people that was in Iraq, blah, 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 blah. Okay, all these motherfuckers basically got subjugated, you know what I'm saying, to put it lightly. But specifically, the people of Dumat al-Jandal, whose prior leader was Uqaydir Abdallah al-Malik, they were Christians. When they got conquered and they had stipulations placed upon them, because they got invaded initially and then their chief got captured, they were forced to convert to Islam, right? It wasn't no light stipulation toward those people. So in my mind, I'm like, why is it that the people of Najran really don't have to face any, and I don't want to say consequences, but, you know, compared to other people, they had a really light-ass stipulation. I fucking honestly believe because, for lack of a better word, Muhammad was more flattered and showed a little bit more